Hi, and greetings from northern Michigan. This is Bob the Science Guy. Ever since I saw the first moon landing and the launch of Apollo 17, I've had an interest in the space program. This series is about Project Gemini. We'll go over each of the missions, profile the crews, discuss what they did and what they learned. It seems as though history has forgotten them, but they are the ones that helped get us to the moon. And the triumph of the shuttle and the ISS was built upon the foundation they carefully laid in the mid-60s. So join me now as we review the two-man cruise of Gemini, a bridge between Mercury and Apollo. Gemini 6A and B was a very interesting mission. Gemini 6, under the command of Wally Schirra, was the manned vehicle, and Gemini 6B was an Agena's target vehicle. On October 25, 1965, Schirra and his pilot, Thomas Stanford, climbed into the Gemini 6 capsule. A short distance away, the Gemini 6B capsule, the Agena's target vehicle, launched from Cape Kennedy. As Schirra and Stanford completed the preparations for their launch, they listened to the 6B Agena's target vehicle blow up on the way to orbit. Needless to say, they suddenly were out of a job and their launch was canceled. Gemini 6 pilot was Thomas P. Stafford. A 1952 graduate of the Naval Academy, he was selected by lottery to be commissioned into the newly formed Air Force. In addition to the Navy, Stafford had served with the Army National Guard in Oklahoma while in high school, making him a three-service veteran. In the Air Force, he served as an F-86 fighter pilot and a test pilot before being selected to Group 2 of the astronauts in 1962, along with Neil Armstrong. Gemini 6 command pilot Wally Schirra was one of the Mercury 7. Schirra had flown Sigma 7, which was the sixth manned Mercury mission. It was the third orbital mission and the first mission to demonstrate maneuverability of a spacecraft in orbit. One thing of significance during that mission was the fact that once he was recovered and on the deck of the carrier, Schirra actually blew the door to the capsule. This deliberate action caused a very specific and characteristic injury to him, and was subsequently cited as evidence that Virgil Grissom had not blown the door on purpose, or he would have sustained the same injury. And now for the rest of the story. The mission of Gemini 6A was to meet up with an Agena's target vehicle and dock with it. As the Agena's was lost on the way to orbit, the decision was made to have Gemini 6A meet up with the next scheduled capsule launch, which was Gemini 7. Rather than actually dock in space, the decision was made to have the two manned spacecraft rendezvous and keep station with each other at close distance, sometimes down to as little as 30 centimeters. The Gemini 7 was designed primarily as a long-duration mission. They were to spend almost 14 days in orbit, conducting more than 20 experiments. Crammed into a capsule the size of a sports car, I'm sure that 14-day mission also tested the sanity of Borman and Lovell. The crew of Gemini 7 was rather unique in that they did not have a member of the original Mercury 7 with them. Jim Lovell was a graduate of Annapolis and a naval aviator and fighter pilot. He was first in his class at Naval Test Pilot School, along with classmates Wally Schirra and Pete Conrad. After failing the selection in the Mercury 7, he was selected in the second group of astronauts along with Neil Armstrong. Frank Borman was a fighter pilot and Air Force officer when he was selected to the second group of astronauts in 1962. He was one of 4 members of that astronaut class chosen to command his first Gemini mission.
Jim Lovell did comment, but he was looking forward to a good long flight. Attending the breakfast with astronauts Borman and Lovell with Wally Schirra and Tom Stafford, pilots for the Gemini 6 mission, which will be scheduled some 9 days after the Gemini 7 liftoff. The prime pilots for the Gemini 7 mission, Frank Borman and Jim Lovell, have arrived at Launch Complex 19. They're in their lightweight suits. They have their helmets attached.
Basically, this lightweight suit offers greater mobility and comfort for the crew, which will fly 14 days in space. However, it offers the same protection in any emergency as the standard suit. During a flight of Gemini 7, the crew will remove their lightweight spacesuit and fly in their underwear.
T-minus 1 minute and counting. The launch vehicle first stage engines will ignite and build up some 430,000 pounds of thrust. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6,
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition.
Engines start. We have a liftoff.
We're on our way, Frank.
In short order, the booster for Gemini 6A was
Orbiter
being
reports
rolled
he has
out.
the booster
Meanwhile,
in sight.
Gemini 7 practiced rendezvousing with its booster stage.
Our initial orbit was 87 by 177 nautical miles. This was very close to what we'd hoped for. As a matter of fact, I think that our launch vehicle was closer to nominal than any other one that's been fired. After insertion, we turned around and thrusted back toward our second stage, and then we station kept or remained with the booster. Actually, we were about 60 feet away from it for around 20 minutes. About 22 minutes into the flight, we thrusted away from our second stage and then got down to the business of a 14-day long-duration flight.
We had about 20 experiments to perform in the 2 weeks ahead, but we, of course, had to check our new suits out, and we did regular medical checkups with the surgeons on the ground.
Gemini 7 is basically a medical mission. It's the culmination of our efforts to increase or double man's exposure to the spaceflight environment, ending with a 14-day manned space flight. There were 3 principal problems left following our 4 and 8-day flights. These were the ability to sleep in a spaceflight environment. Secondly, the response of the heart and blood vessels to the readaptation to the ground-based or 1G environment after being weightless. And lastly, the reduction or decrease in the number of red blood cells that is observed following space flight.
The word from the Cape is, we are go. They are go aboard Gemini 7 as they make their silent sweeps around the world on their 111th revolution.
The prime pilots for the Gemini 6 flight, Wally Schirra and Tom Stafford, and are now on their way to Launch Complex 19 to board their spacecraft.
The launch of Gemini 6 is scheduled at the beginning of the 118th revolution of Gemini 7.
T-minus 48 and all still going well with our Gemini 6 countdown here at Launch Complex 19. We've gone through a complete checklist once again, and we are counting.
2 to go. Go ahead, flight.
We will have ignition at 0, and some 3 seconds after ignition, the launch vehicle will lift off on the start of the Gemini 6 flight.
You're cleared for takeoff. Roger, adios. Minus 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Shut down, Gemini 6.
Fuel pressure is lowering slowly.
Roger, Gemini 6. Monitor tank pressures.
Oxidizer pressure is down to about 32.
Full tanks are venting.
Okay, no problem on these tanks?
Negative.
Okay, we're just sitting here breathing. This was a rough one for us. We'd been trained sufficiently, but this was different than any simulation we ever had. It did prove that man is still better programmed than any computer.
Gemini 7, Houston. We were wondering if you saw the ignition at the Cape.
We were in perfect position, but we never saw the ignition. We were waiting for the liftoff.
Roger, apparently it was on and off very quickly. We'll keep you informed.
It was a great disappointment. We'd made 2 attempts to launch and still no liftoff.
Yes, Gemini 6 failed to launch on the first attempt. Rather than punching out of the capsule using the ejection seats, they were successful in shutting the rocket down and then letting it cool off. Fortunately, they were able to turn it around and launch again in a couple of days.
Gemini 7, Carnarvon Cape Town. The thruster firings went very good on GT6. Oh, that sounds good. Roger, looks like you have company before long.
Roger, I hope the booster firing did the same.
By about 20 seconds. Mark. Go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Engine start.
Got a real liftoff.
27 seconds after the hour. Flight dynamics says the trajectory looks very good.
Rocket rudder. Roll complete.
Roger, roll.
Cabin pressure sealed. Now 50 seconds.
2 minutes. Our velocity now 3,700 miles an hour.
Go ahead, Canaries, Gemini 7.
Roger, well, we did it.
Roger, we saw them coming up.
Okay, their orbit is 87 by 140.
At Cape Kennedy, the American spacecraft Gemini 6 has finally succeeded in starting her journey towards the space rendezvous with Gemini 7, whose 2 astronauts have now been in space since December the 4th. They were actually able to watch the launch while they orbited.
We cannot expect both spacecraft to be in exactly the same orbital plane. Therefore, at 2 hours and 42 minutes after liftoff, Gemini 6 command pilot Wallace Schirra will yaw his spacecraft to the south and execute a plane change maneuver that will place his spacecraft exactly in the same orbit with Gemini 7.
The practice maneuvers of the earlier Gemini flights came into play now, as Gemini 6 maneuvered to rendezvous with Gemini 7.
Both spacecraft are now in the same orbital plane. Gemini 6, for the second time, will apply thrust at apogee to circularize his orbit at 146 nautical miles and to also slow his catch-up rate. At this point in time, Gemini 6 will be 15 miles below Gemini 7 and 140 miles behind. By this point in time, Gemini 6 should be within radar contact of Gemini 7.
There's just over an hour to go now before America's 2 spacecraft with their 4 astronauts on board can't meet 180 miles up in darkness over the Pacific Ocean.
At 11:25 local time, Gemini 6 spacecraft began its circularization burn. That burn was completed on schedule. The crews also have completed successfully a radar lock-on test.
And say again the range.
Range was 115.58.
All systems are looking good, flight. Tell you, he's flat flying that thing. He's just as steady as can be.
When the slant range distance between Gemini 6 and Gemini 7 has been reduced to approximately 32 nautical miles, Gemini 6 will initiate the first of a series of terminal phase maneuvers. These maneuvers are accomplished by the command pilot placing the nose of his spacecraft at his target, Gemini 7, and thrusting along the line of sight. There will be 2 mid-course correction maneuvers, probably here and here. These maneuvers will place him on a trajectory that will be slightly below and in front of Gemini 7. At this point, he will perform a velocity match or braking maneuver that will bring about rendezvous. When he has completely matched the velocity of Gemini 7, he will station keep for several orbits. However, he will not dock.
The original plan was for the Gemini 6 to dock with the genus target vehicle. However, with the loss of the target vehicle on its way to orbit, the decision was made not to attempt a dock at first with 2 manned spacecraft. As a result, the goal of this flight was to rendezvous, to come within a foot of each other, and to fly in formation for several orbits.
7 Hawaii will be standing by if you have anything for us.
Okay. I have .54 nautical miles. Stand by to break. Break at .48 nautical miles. 660 feet. 300 feet. We're directly below them. 180 feet. 120 feet. Holding 120 feet, Wally.
Ask them what their range is now.
About 20 feet.
Yeah, we're sitting up here playing bridge together. We're in formation with 7. Everything is go here.
Roger, congratulations. Excellent.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun. Rendezvous and docking are feasible for manned crews. After we completed the rendezvous maneuver, we maintained formation, actually we were station keeping, for a period of about 5.5 hours. Now this included an in-plane fly-around maneuver and an out-of-plane fly-around maneuver.
During this period of time, each of us controlled spacecraft 6 for approximately 50% of the maneuvers. We separated from Gemini 7 at 6 p.m. Cape time. This was performed by a 9 feet per second retrograde maneuver. We separated to a distance of approximately 20 miles and performed experiments for the next 2 orbits.
Following the orbital rendezvous, Gemini 6 fired its retro rockets and returned to the Earth, followed by Gemini 7 several days later.
It was really a treat to come back aboard in style on number 3 elevator, to have the realization that to accomplish the lunar mission, we had to prove endurance, and we're still proving it now, and to effect rendezvous. Rendezvous is so important to bring our men back from the surface of the moon and back to the Earth, and I hope also to number 3 elevator.
The chief symptom, in fact, the only symptom which we noticed, was the heaviness of the legs. That's all.
The 14-day mission has shown us that man indeed adapts to the spaceflight environment, that his body does not show changes which increase with his increasing exposure to that environment. The additional data allows us to medically commit man to a lunar mission.
Actually, there were a number of difficult problems that were encountered and were overcome. Some of these required considerable ingenuity. The best example of this was actually the reaction to the difficulty we had in the October launch attempt of Gemini 6. We were able to come up with a new mission. We were able to cycle back into our operation faster than ever before and conducted this very rapid turnaround.
Gemini 6 currently resides at the McDonnell Planetarium in St. Louis, Missouri, while Gemini 7 is at the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. Wally Schirra went on to command Apollo 7, becoming the first American to fly in space 3 times. Schirra and the crew of Apollo 7 broadcast the first live television pictures from a spacecraft in flight, and were famous for refusing to wear their helmets during re-entry. He retired from the astronaut corps in 1969 and died of cancer in 2007. Thomas Stafford went on to command Gemini 9, Apollo 10, and the Apollo-Soyuz mission. During the return to Earth from the Apollo-Soyuz mission, fuel leaked into the cabin, causing 1 crew member to lose consciousness and all 3 to be hospitalized with pulmonary edema. Stafford retired from the Air Force in November 1979 as a 3-star general. He was the first general officer to fly in space. During his Air Force career, he flew over 120 different types of fixed and rotary wing aircraft in 3 different spacecraft. Frank Borman went on to command Apollo 8 and orbit the moon. He retired from NASA in 1969 and went on to lead Eastern Airlines. He is the oldest living astronaut and is still active in restoring classic aircraft. Jim Lovell went on to command the final Gemini mission, Gemini 12. He served as command module pilot on Apollo 8 and was the commander of the ill-fated Apollo 13. Lovell retired as a naval captain in 1973. He did have a cameo role on the movie Apollo 13 as the captain of the aircraft carrier that recovered the spacecraft at the end of the movie. This is Bob the Science Guy. I hope you enjoyed this video and the ones that are to come. So let's sign out from Northern Michigan, and we'll see you soon.